Hi, everybody. Welcome back. We're here for another one of your questions about work. And today we're going to talk about a more technical subject, something thorny that it applies not just to entrepreneurs, but especially to entrepreneurs, which, as folks who have been watching know, is the context that we most focus on here at Bloomberg Beta. And for those of you who are here for the first time, I'm Roy. I'm a startup investor in the future of work. And I had the great joy this summer of getting to work with George, who was a summer fellow with us at Bloomberg Beta through HBCU VC, which is an organization we've partnered with on many things. He worked closely with Sydney Teed, our chief of staff, and he's a student at University of Michigan's Business School. And there we go. I see you're flying the colors.
Blue.
There we go. And George's project with us was working on something we wanted to do for a long time, which is just explain to people who may not have built a financial model for the first time, why and how to do it. So George, after having spent now weeks working on this problem, and now, for those of you who are curious, we'll put this up at the end as well. You can go find our guidance on how to produce a financial model, a project I started literally years ago and George brought to conclusion along with our CFO, Mark Schultz. So the question is, let's say I'm a founder and I'm like, I don't really want to do this. This seems like a pain. I'm starting my company. Why, help me understand, why should I build a financial model? And let's talk about a little bit of what's involved and we'll go from there.
Yeah. So first off, Roy, amazing to see you again and again. It hasn't even been a week and excited to be back in this seat.
You can't leave.
I'm family. But I think for me, I like to think of things in frameworks and ways for me to remember. So the first thing for me, the very most important thing is providing clarity. As a founder, it provides financial and actually for your startup clarity for both yourself, for you to understand where your money's coming from. And by money, I mean cash, where your cash is coming from, how long you have to use your cash, but then also it provides it to anyone on your team and especially your investors. That's the first thing. The second thing I'll say is it's command. It provides a command by knowing those numbers or knowing that you don't know, knowing your unknowns, being able to go figure those out. It provides you a command of your business and actually allows you to prioritize with your team and your investors on what to do next. And the last thing, because you have that clarity and you have that command, it provides a conviction of direction of where to go for help or where to go to get more. And so that cash, that understanding of the clarity and that command allows you to do so. So those are my thoughts.
I love that. I mean, I think that seems, in an environment like startups where so much is unknown, we often look to hold on to these handholds on the rock face of uncertainty. And one of them can be, you may not know how many customers you're going to have, but if you're going to have X customers and charge price Y, well then, this is how much revenue you're going to have. And so that thinking can provide, like you said, those 3 C's. For sometimes what ends up happening is people go overboard and make a work of fiction out of it. And so one of the things I loved in how you broke it down was where to start so you avoid doing that. So if a business school classmate of yours came to you and they're like, I'm starting my company doing X, even though I'm in business school, I've actually hush, secret, never made a financial model. Literally, what might they do to get going? What are the first few steps look like?
Yeah, the funny thing is that's me. I think for someone like myself, that's why I was able to write this piece, because I felt like I was writing it for myself, just doing the research and doing the journey. So I'll get directly to your answer first, and then we'll go riff on it a little bit. First thing to me to do is just write down what I know. Less is more. So get started on just a blank sheet of paper and writing what you know, knowing that you're not going to go look at some template and just start plugging in numbers, because that business or that template might not be for your startup. Actually, for yourself, get to clarity. What do you know? What don't you know? And then your immediate second step after that is to put it in a spreadsheet, whether you've been in business school or not, because everyone doesn't go or think business school is needed. How do you use to Excel or some documentation that allows you to plus, add, minus, that type of thing to then organize it? And again, less is more there. What do you know? What don't you know? And then lastly from that, I shouldn't say lastly, but I work in 3s. How do you have someone else? Because those first 2 steps are you. What do you know, don't you know? Then take the time to put that in an Excel sheet. That might take a day, timing. That might take a week. That might take a month. But it's important for you as the founder / co-founder or leader to do that, and then bring in someone else, which was something I felt was a lot of importance in even writing this. You, Roy, amazing, been here for years, and you needed me to help and Mark to help. I and Mark needed other founders to give perspective because all three of us work for Bloomberg Beta. And so this process is also a journey on helping others understand through your journey on how they can help you, which is the whole partnership of this anyways. When you think of a startup, like you're providing a service or a product for others, how do you allow this process to be that?
I love that. And as you looked at financial models that others have made, what were some of the things that stood out to you as like, oh, this was really helpful, avoid this, do that? Like there's oftentimes this kind of, I don't know, there's like the language of expertise that only once you've stared at something a lot do these patterns, they're often implicit, but they can rise to the surface. And so what are some of those details you found yourself looking at?
Yeah, and this is where I'll cheat a little bit. I know those, but I think because people are listening to this live, we'll bring back up the bit.ly if it can happen. But this is what we actually talked about in our piece that we wrote together, our guide. And then the first one to me is like using real labels. I think sometimes you think of like month 1, month 2, month 3, but how do you literally on your spreadsheet, once you start putting numbers there, use real labels like August 2022. Don't say 5 years from now or 1 year from now. Try to use something this year and just use the calendar year. We're in what, August 31st now? So today, if you're starting, put September 1, September, use the real labels. The second thing I'll say is how are you avoiding visual clutter? Again, less is more. And so as you're thinking through these things, especially if you've never done this before, how do you make this easy for you? Don't try to do things you haven't done before. Avoid some of those things. And again, most of this is hopefully for someone who's just getting started in the first couple of months, first couple of years. And so I'll stop there because we have a lot more in our guide and would love for
Yeah,
those.
I mean, I really appreciate that. I think that there's a principle that's implicit in there. I mean, in the guide, we've got a lot of the like do your checklist of stuff. But the principle there to me is if you think you're doing something that's nonsense, stop. And I think great founders actually learn this is they don't do useless. Well, I don't want to say they don't do because everybody ends up doing some of it and in retrospect, but they get a strong detector, an inner bullshit meter for like, hey, I'm making up some thing in for like 2027 and like, why am I doing that again? This is just fiction. And so I think that's really powerful. Any final tips before we, we'll point people one more time, but anything you want to make sure we leave people with?
Yeah, I want to leave people, and especially the people that are listening to this, is you're a founder for a reason. This is hard, but so is whatever your company or your idea is. So is dealing with people. This is just another part of the hard, which why you started the business you started. So this is something that you can do, and hopefully this guide helps you do that. The last thing I'll say is what's beautiful about this guide is it was written with 3 people. One, a venture capitalist in Roy, Mark, who is before Beta was working at a startup, and George, who's a future founder. And so it does have those pro tips, guidance in there. It's not just one piece from a VC or one piece from a founder. So this does provide that richness.
Yeah. And sometimes when we write stuff, we're like, hey, here's some quick thoughts. And sometimes we're like, no, this is going to continue evolving and we want expertise. And you can go look in the piece. Like we consulted with investors and founders and people from a diverse range of backgrounds and some of them saw things differently. I mean, about things like a cash flow versus a P&L, there were differing opinions. We ultimately took a position in the piece, but others may see it differently. And I'm just so grateful we got to work on it together, George. And I'm looking forward. I know we're going to have you back on This Is Not Advice next week, and we'll talk about some more career stuff. And just, thank you again for the summer. And, for folks who are out there, we answer these questions for you. You can find the compendium of past questions here at thisisnotadvice.work and to be continued.
I love it. Have a great